Hey guys, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Ryan Wolff. I'm a producer on The Good Stuff, and I've been a Chicago area resident for most of my life. For the past 5 years, I've lived in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago, a vibrant community with a lot of rich cultural heritage. It's home to one of Chicago's largest art districts, and it's a port of entry for a lot of Mexican immigrants, making it one of the largest Latino communities in the city. It's also an industrial community and home to one of Chicago's 2 coal-fired power plants, the Fisk generating station. At first I didn't think much of it, just another massive smokestack and part of the interesting looking industrial backdrop of my neighborhood. But then a couple years ago I met a group of people who didn't really care for the coal plant all that much.
Well, we are the Clean Power Coalition. My name is Rosalie Van Serra. I am a board member of Pilsen Alliance, and the reason I'm here is that I have lived too close to the Fisk plant in Pilsen for way too many years. There's one thing that we cannot live with any longer, and that is the pollution in the air that is killing us. It sickens us, and it costs millions of health dollars every year.
Ooh, so low in the sky, it taps his feet around my bedside, and it breaks the locks on all my dreams. Ooh.
I'm an immigrant. I was born in Mexico City. I came to the United States when I was 5 years old. My mom and dad worked as farm workers, migrant workers in Michigan, and then we settled here in Chicago. So I've grown up in Chicago for, I would say, most of my life. A lot of the residents that are here have dealt with this kind of contamination for years. They've suffered the breathing problems, the asthma.
In 2001, the Harvard University School of Public Health did a study that examined 9 coal-fired power plants in Illinois and the health effects those plants had on the local community. According to the study, they found that the Fisk and Crawford plants alone were responsible for 2,800 asthma attacks, 550 emergency room visits, and 41 premature deaths every year.
I don't want to be the next to die because of Midwest generation's pollution. I don't want my neighbors to be next, and I certainly don't want any of you to be the next ones to die.
So when we burn coal in a coal power plant, you primarily get sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides of nitrogen. And the third thing you get is particles, like fine particles. It could be fly ash from the thing, or particles that form along the edges of a power plant flume. And then there is another one called mercury, which is a very toxic chemical, but it's the primary source of mercury from anthropogenic, meaning human activities, is mainly from coal burning in power plants.
Sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides combine with water in the air to create acid rain, which can cause damage to crops and become absorbed by our lungs and bloodstreams. Nitrogen oxides can also produce ground-level ozone, which can make people more susceptible to respiratory diseases and asthma attacks. Particulate matter, often referred to as soot or fly ash, can cause chronic bronchitis, aggravated asthma, and even premature death. A study done in 2010 by the Clean Air Task Force found similar results to the Harvard study. 66 heart attacks and 42 premature deaths were caused every year by Fisk and Crawford. Part of the reason these numbers are so high could be due to the fact that 1 in 4 Chicagoans live within a 3-mile radius of these plants. In fact, Chicago is the only major metropolitan area in the country with not 1 but 2 coal plants within city limits. Which begged the question, why does such a densely populated area have 2 coal plants in the first place, and why, in 2012, were they still here? Between 1870 and 1900, Chicago grew from a city of just under 300,000 to nearly 1.7 million people, making it at the time the fastest growing city ever. To meet the growing demand for electricity at the turn of the century, the Fisk generating station was constructed on the south edge of the Pilsen neighborhood along the banks of the Chicago River. When Fisk went online in 1903, it was equipped with a 5-megawatt steam-powered turbine, which at the time was the largest and most powerful turbine in the world, producing over twice as much power as any steam engine ever built. Fisk was later followed by the Crawford generating station, which was built a few miles west in 1924. Both plants were completely rebuilt in the 50s, and by 2012 the Fisk station turbine was capable of generating 326 megawatts. To generate this much power, Fisk would have to burn roughly 176 tons of coal every hour, making it a small to medium-sized coal-fired power plant. In response to the growing health threat from coal plants and other polluters, the Clean Air Act was passed in 1963 to control air pollution on a national level. The Clean Air Act requires the Environmental Protection Agency to develop and enforce regulations to protect the public from airborne contaminants. The amendments to the Clean Air Act in the 70s drastically reduced the allowable levels of harmful emissions from coal-fired power plants. At least, that was the idea.
The question was, when the Clean Air Act got written, how were you going to take all these new regulations and apply them to existing sources without putting sources out of business? And so the plan really was that plants could get grandfathered. They could continue operating the way they were operating until they did some sort of major upgrade. So then the question became, how do you define major modification? What's major? The idea is that these plants from the 40s and 50s and whatnot, their lifespan would only be 30 years. If they didn't do a major modification, they would shut down in the 80s or the 90s.
Despite the Clean Air Act's intentions, by the early 2000s there were still many outdated active coal plants across the country, including Fisk and Crawford, that did not have modern pollution controls because they never underwent any major modifications. However, not everyone was buying this explanation.
We were able to look through public databases and find these huge projects that were $60 million and up, and long periods when the plants were shut down. And when you're spending $60 million on a plant that's worth a few $100 million, that's not looking like routine maintenance. But we also identified other violations of opacity. And opacity really is, you can look up at a smokestack, you look at how dark the smoke is, how much light is coming through it. And it's a way of measuring actual particulate matter.
The Environmental Law and Policy Center filed various lawsuits against Midwest Generation, the owners of Fisk and Crawford, but it did not stop the plants from continuing their normal operation. In April of 2010, Alderman Joe Moore, in cooperation with ELPC and other community groups, introduced the Clean Power Ordinance, a push to cut CO2 emissions from the plants by 50% and a 90% reduction in particulate matter. Although the ordinance had a growing list of supporters, it was denied a formal hearing for over a year and never put to an actual vote. Among those who did not support the ordinance were Chicago Mayor Richard Daley and Pilsen's Alderman Danny Solis.
See, that was such a point of contention where the current alderman was saying there's nothing wrong with Fisk. Yet the residents were saying, yes, there is something wrong because we're getting sick. Everybody very well knows, right, that our alderman admitted to receiving over $50,000 from Midwest Gen. And during that time, he swore on his political campaign literature that there was nothing wrong with this company. People get paid off and opinions change.
In fact, since the year 2000, Danny Solis, the alderman of the 25th Ward, received over $55,000 from Midwest Generation and their parent company, Edison International, making them his third largest campaign contributor.
So when this struggle started many, many years ago, you know, it may have had people that were opposed to it, but they soon found a way to quiet community groups.
Please go back to those community organizations and ask them. Go back to your priest, your parish priest, you know, ask them, why aren't you more involved in this issue? It's killing us off. How much do they get from this? That's the question you need to ask when you're asking why don't we have community organizations behind this issue.
Throughout Pilsen's history, it's been a port of entry. It's always been a working class immigrant community. Social justice issues are always issues that have to be fought for. Things don't come easy to the residents of Pilsen.
As time progressed, however, it became more difficult for local politicians to ignore the health problems in Pilsen. In January of 2010, the EPA placed a lead monitor on the roof of Perez Elementary, a local school just located a few blocks away from Fisk and directly across the street from H. Kramer, a brass melting factory. The monitor showed that average lead levels at Perez Elementary School were at or above federal limits during three-month periods in 2010, and on one day in December, spiked to more than 10 times higher than the national standard. Though it was uncertain as to which of the local polluters was to blame, it was clear that something needed to be done. After a decade-long struggle, the fight to get the Fisk and Crawford plants shut down finally started to receive some nationwide attention. Local community groups and aldermen teamed up with the Sierra Club and Greenpeace to create the Clean Power Coalition, a collective whose purpose was to pressure the city to pass the Clean Power Ordinance and force the Fisk and Crawford plants to either clean up or shut down. The Sierra Club launched a citywide ad campaign targeting the two plants, elaborate protests and demonstrations were staged, and in May 2010, 8 members of Greenpeace broke into the Fisk generating station, climbed the 450-foot tall smokestack, and painted the words "Quit Coal" in giant black letters. They stayed there for 72 hours straight and only came down when forced to by bad weather. At the same time, several other Greenpeace activists lowered themselves and a banner from a bridge near the Crawford generating station and successfully blocked a coal barge from making a delivery. Meanwhile, the political climate was also changing. A new mayor was elected, and on February 22, 2011, Danny Solis only received 49% of the vote in the aldermanic election, just 96 votes shy of winning outright and resulting in a runoff election between Solis and opponent Cuauhtemoc Morfin, a strong supporter of the effort to clean up the Fisk and Crawford plants. 2 weeks later, Solis changed his position and officially announced his support of the Clean Power Ordinance.
He did it because he was going to lose the election. That's why he changed his mind.
On April 5, 2011, Danny Solis won the runoff election, and in July, the Clean Power Ordinance was reintroduced, this time with the full support of Solis and 30 other Chicago aldermen, well above the 26 votes needed to pass the ordinance and make it a law. However, despite this overwhelming support, months went by and the ordinance was still never put to a formal vote.
On the 15th of February, the Clean Power Ordinance is being reintroduced into committee.
We need grassroots support. We need you. And that's what's going to make the change. We're hoping that our numbers push them towards taking that vote. That's our goal.
On February 15, 2012, members of the Pilsen Alliance went to City Hall to join with the rest of the Clean Power Coalition and to show their support for the Clean Power Ordinance as it was reintroduced back into committee.
Running out. How many more people will have to die or become ill for us to do something about this terrible injustice in our communities?
The emerging green economy is the future for living wage jobs, not jobs that will only be around another 5 or 10 years and which poison our communities in the process.
As residents of the communities next to Fisk and Crawford, we are here to say, let's move Chicago beyond coal now.
I'd like to take this opportunity to suspend the rules so we can recognize a very consistent group that has been here in the City Council chambers for at least a couple of years, and that's the Clean Power Coalition. They've been very persistent. I think they're on the second floor, but they've been very persistent for 2 years in getting the attention of the municipality and the state legislature on the issue of clean power. And I know that the administration has been working to negotiate a settlement with the power plant, and I just wanted to thank them and recognize them for their consistency in this very vital issue for the health of our community.
All right, we're ready to go, folks. That was it.
Is that it? What?
That was it.
So how do you think that went?
Oh, well, you know, it's such a slow process.
Yeah.
There is a meeting going on right now with some of the representatives of the coalition with the mayor's staff. So we'll see what happens after this meeting today.
1, 2, 3. Clean power! Great job today, everyone.
Let's take a picture of us.
Yeah, sure. All right, guys. Say clean air.
Clean air.
Clean air.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to this. First off, I'd like to start with thanking all the coalition members that have come here today, and now I'll just start my speech. Good morning. My name is Anthony Wasserman. I am here today on behalf of Little Village Environmental Justice Organization and the Chicago Clean Power Coalition. Today, after a decade of protests, die-ins, vigils, petitions, marches, and occupations of the coal mounds and smokestacks, it is with great honor that I share with you that our communities have won.
Yesterday, Mayor Rahm Emanuel, Midwest Generation, and the Chicago Clean Power Coalition announced an agreement that would shut down these plants in 2012 and 2014.
We're excited. We're excited because we won. Didn't we?
Se oye, se siente, el pueblo está presente. Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop. Say what? Ain't no power like the power of the people, because the power of the people don't stop. Hey!
You know, I've lived between 2 coal plants for more than 30 years, but this will be the last year.
I think it's a huge victory for Pilsen. I think it's a huge victory for the children of Pilsen, who no longer have to suffer like my nephews who have asthma.
I hate to see people lose jobs in an economy like now, but you know what, right now we're fighting for our lives. This is what we've come to. And you know, it's a victory for, I believe, you know, all the families here. I really do.
This is why, along with neighbors and supporters, we made phone calls, circulated petitions, we came to rallies, we went to City Hall, so that today we could say, we did it!
When people said it couldn't be done, or people said, no, you're wasting your time, I think they probably ended up giving me more energy. I am so convinced that you just got to keep going.
Get that smoke out of my face. It smells like there's something wrong.
In December of 2012, shortly after Fisk and Crawford were shut down, Midwest Generation filed for bankruptcy. Since then, the vacant power plants have been sold, as well as several other operating coal plants in Illinois. There's no word yet as to what will happen to the 2 properties.
I'm sorry that people lost their jobs, but I'm also glad to say that there are no more people dying in Pilsen because of that plant being open. I think that what drives me is that and this may sound, I'm really moved by doing what's right. I'm really moved by things that are just. I thank God that I have a voice and that I've been lucky enough to go to school and get educated.
The planet, we're inheriting it for our time period, but we're passing it to our children. And you know, who doesn't care about their kids and who doesn't want to make a better future for their kids?
So because I am a member of this community, I also feel a responsibility to use the voice that I have.
Open up the window, let the wind blow in, let the wind blow in. Open up the window, let the wind blow in, let the wind blow in. Time tick-tocks, every day stops when the sun drops. Open up your mouth, let the truth come out, let the truth come out. You can't